Hi. So I'm going to look at things in creativity particularly around agencies. My presentation is called UX turns Sherlock, and that's looking at how investigation should always be ongoing, because that's what drives creativity. So a little bit of an introduction. I'm a UX director. These are some of the brands that I've been working with over the last 2 years. Avis, global, all of these are global actually, so I've been working across many markets, understanding problems across different markets. Just to give you a bit of an overview of what's in the presentation. So I'm going to have a look at the role of the agency, if there's any threat to agencies as well, because things are changing so quickly, creativity in leadership, and UX beyond digital as well, because for me, UX doesn't just start and stop at digital. I think it can be applied to everything we do in life. And how agencies can encourage more creativity, and also how agencies are traditionally used to creativity anyway, so how can we drive that further? So, is there a potential threat to agencies at the moment? It can be difficult, as some of you will know, to persuade great UX architects to take on a permanent role over a contract role at the moment. There's a lot of persuasion required, but there are pros and cons on both sides. You know, taking on a permanent role can give your career greater development. You get to see a project through from start to finish, which I know with a lot of contractors that I have in, they're often, you know, if their bit of the project finishes and their contract ends, you know, the one thing they're disappointed in is they don't get to see it through all the way to the end. So there are pros and cons on both sides. And digital is growing so quickly at the moment that agencies are having to heavily rely on contractors. Downside of that being a lot of that, when you bring a contractor in, there's a certain amount of time to get them onboarded and familiar with the product and integrated into the team and working well with everyone, getting to know everyone so that they can work collaboratively. But then often the contracts are short, and once they're gone, that knowledge is lost. It's very difficult to transfer that knowledge and keep it within the business. So from an agency perspective, all of that's lost. There is a trend at the moment towards businesses taking UX in-house, which could be a threat to agencies. Although it's rarely exclusively in-house, they'll often still partner with agencies to do special projects or bring in that additional creativity, because as Charlotte mentioned as well, not all companies have this type of creativity in-house, so often they still feel like they need to bring it in. There are lots of emerging businesses as well, specialising in areas like customer research and analytics and insights, which traditionally would have all been done in one team, but we're seeing lots of offspring companies now. So some of that creativity is going elsewhere. And businesses specialising in user testing. I think it's really important if you're outsourcing or partnering with a company to do user testing, that the UX architects work really closely with them. So in the past, I've seen it before where the work's outsourced, it's done, and then the data comes back. But I've also seen places where I've sent in my UX architects and they've sat together with the user testing team and the customers, and they're able to then change the questions on the go, because if you're testing on 8 users in a day, for example, and your first 4 users give you the same negative feedback, there's almost no need to continue asking the same questions to your next set of testers. So it's a really good opportunity to tweak and change the questions on the fly and get more value back from that. So that adds a lot of creativity. And touching on some of the comments that Charlotte made as well, what's around the value that agencies can still add? Creativity in employment is really important to people today as well, which is why companies like Netflix and Virgin offer kind of limitless holiday, and that's built around trust. They trust their employees are going to do a good job, are going to finish the work. So, well, does it really matter that they want 27 days holiday a year rather than 25 days? So creativity in leadership. Jeff Bezos from Amazon says, if there's one reason we have done better than our peers in the internet space in the last 6 years, it's because we have focused on customer experience. And I think Amazon are a company that do it better than many, many other companies, because they don't just, a lot of other businesses will look at their competitors and do a competitor analysis, do a gap analysis, and then fill in those gaps, and they'll end up with exactly the same thing. Amazon have completely broken the mold with that, and they're not looking at what their competitors are doing. They're looking at what their customers want and need and what could make their experiences better. So with all their services like Amazon Prime Now and Amazon Go, the store that you can just walk in, get your shopping and walk out without going through checkout, solve so many customer problems. At the moment, you know, if you go into a supermarket, you fill your basket or your trolley with things, you walk up to the cash desk, you empty it all, it goes through the cash desk, you pack it into bags, you put it back in the trolley, you get it to your car. It's a very long-winded process. It's much easier to just walk into a store, either swipe your phone or have it automatically read with RFID tag, go and collect your shopping off the shelves and leave the store. Much easier, much faster, and much more pleasant experience. No long queues, no hanging around. So some data from IBM shows that in 2010, 60% of CEOs globally identified creativity as a key leadership skill. Today, that's far closer to 100%. So it's becoming really recognised across all businesses. So once we've created a task-driven site or app like that, and a customer can actually use it and complete the task they want to do, should we stop right there, or is it worth carrying on? Well, an example from Barclays Bank shows that it's really interesting data, shows that it took them 13 years to get to 2 million customers using internet banking. But when they delivered, it's almost the same way of completing a task, but they delivered it in a different way. So they delivered it on mobile. It took just 2 months to get 2 million users using mobile banking. So it just goes to show, even though there is a way of doing something, there's often a much better way of doing it that can get more engagement and more users using it and completing the task they want to. So Elon Musk said failure is an option here. If things are not failing, then you're not innovating enough. Now, Google was quite famous for their Google Glass fail, although I think we will see it coming back soon. This was quite a few years ago now, so it was a bit ahead of its time, I think. We weren't quite ready for it. I think we'll be more ready for it next time around. Although saying that, they have created the very innovative Google Cardboard, which has been far more successful, although a little less high-tech. So beyond digital, where else is UX actually needed? And I am going to quote Steve Jobs. You've got to start with the customer experience and work your way back to the technology, not the other way around. And he said that back in 1997. So I speak to a lot of people at the moment who think UX is very, very new, but actually it's been around a while. It's just not been the norm. So this is an example of where UX would have really added some value. I don't know if anyone knows this. You seem to know this, this bridge in Venice. It's the Calatrava Bridge of the Constitution. It was built a few years ago at the cost of £4 million. And it's built outside of a train station. And it has steps all over it. And those steps are made of glass in Venice, which is surrounded by water. So it seems to me they might not have looked at how people actually use train stations. You know, people will often be dragging along heavy suitcases and pushing buggies, and there's no way of getting a wheelchair across it. So one of the sounds that come off this bridge is just thud, 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 with all the suitcase and things people are dragging over. And in the winter, the glass steps get very slippery as well because there's so much water around, so there's lots of moisture in the air. It gets very foggy in Venice as well. So it has, it's led to a lot of hospital visits, twisted ankles, and other injuries, which could have all been avoided if they did a little bit of UX research and were a little more open to creativity rather than just the look. How do we make it more functional for the people using it? So they've tried to bolt on little like little, it's almost like a cable car at the side to try and get people across it who can't travel across. So it's a bit of a UX fail. So how can agencies encourage more creativity? Well, you know, a lot of them have, you're all laughing, a lot of agencies these days, you know, they have their fruit box delivery, they have their pool tables, they have their beer Fridays. Is it really encouraging actual creativity though? I'm not sure it is. It's definitely fun, but it may not necessarily be encouraging creativity. I was speaking to a startup just last week who was saying, you know, I'm doing everything. I've got my pool table, I've got my fruit boxes, but it's just not working. The people are not engaging. They're just not getting creative. And I think people are demanding a bit more work-life balance. All these things are designed to keep you in the office, not get you out and get you learning and more creative. And I think a lot of that's leading to the demand for a lot of UX architects wanting to contract. And there's also, I went to a talk a few months ago by Martin Lindstrom, who basically helps a lot of the leading companies in the world, like Disney, with their customer experience. And he spends about 300 nights of the year in people's houses, really understanding who they are and really getting to the heart of their kind of personas, I suppose. And one of the things that he recognised, particularly in the younger generation and children, is they're so entertained and engaged with toys and with their iPhones and their tablets and their games consoles, that they just don't have time to get bored. And creativity comes through just giving your mind a little space to get bored and actually have a think. So if we're always engaging ourselves in things, we're not giving ourselves time for creativity. Bill Gates said, your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. So how do we find those unhappy customers? We need to get out, ask the customer, and become the customer. So agencies need to kind of not be quite so big-headed and think they know everything, because they don't. We need to speak to the customers far more. I think it's really important that agencies as well encourage more people to go to industry events. Client side, it's encouraged a lot more than in agencies at the moment. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be directly related or a relevant event. For example, there's a great event coming up in May, the Retail Technology Exhibition in Olympia. Highly recommend it. It's a really good place to engage with new technology, try it out. There's lots of new things. It may not be directly related to what you're doing because it's focused on retail, but a lot of these tools and ideas are transferable across different industries. Speak to customers and become the customer. I think not enough agencies at the moment are actually going out there and experiencing what the customer experiences with the product or the service. A lot of them will focus on desk research, get analytics and company insights, but there are lots of things that can be missed without actually experiencing it and speaking to customers. Like if I give an example, I did a customer journey mapping exercise about a year ago with Avis. And I did it globally with a few of my team, and we went and rented cars from different places, on airport sites, off airport sites, from little offices. And there are lots of things that came up, like things around to do with not being able to pick up your car off an off airport site unless it's during the hours of 9 to 5, which are not convenient. But one of the things that came up again and again was every time we opened a vehicle and got inside, we didn't know how to start the car because they're all so different these days. So we had to run back inside and ask the person who was helping, if they weren't serving another customer, to come out and help us, show us how to start the car, because they're all so high-tech these days. They're not just a key that you put in or a button. Sometimes you don't do anything, you just keep it in your pocket and it starts. So there are little things like that you just don't get from analytics and research on competitors and things. So it's really important to get out there and understand how the customers are experiencing it. More face-to-face testing. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier about how you can, if you do face-to-face testing, then you can change the test as you're going along and get far better insights. So agencies are used to creativity anyway, because they're traditionally set up to pitch for companies. They're very well placed to generate ideas quickly. They're great at doing collaborative workshops, which a lot more businesses are doing now. And I think they're getting better, but very slowly, at getting their people out and engaging with the products and services more. So, for example, at Spark, they're sending their people out, engaging in JLR Experience Day, so you can get behind the wheel, drive the car, get a feel for what the customer would feel when they're in these luxury vehicles. Agencies are well placed to consider customer first principles, because they always have done. I think another way to get more creativity is sitting project teams together, because I think often in agencies you'll get UX on one side of building, you get project management on another side, development on another side, but actually if you bring everyone together and sitting in project teams, particularly with bigger projects, you can bring a lot of value and everyone can work together every day, becoming more creative. And embracing new technologies as well. It's not always possible in projects, but getting more engagement with clients and with the rest of the team can help drive more creativity around what new technology can we use as well, which would enhance the experience. So Michael Dell said, the point is you can't keep doing the same thing and expect it to keep working. You can't be afraid to fail, because that's when you learn. So how do we fail fast though? We want to fail, but we don't want to keep failing and for a long period of time. We want to fail fast and get on with it and come up with a great solution. So collaborative working can help us do that. Everyone working together, rapid prototyping, test it. If it fails, come up with something new. Agile methodology as well has helped save hundreds of pages of documentations that no one really can be bothered to read. I certainly can't. And I think agencies have really helped drive Agile methodology as well, because they're very used to presenting things in a very visual way. And it's much easier to get buy-in from clients as well if you're showing things in a visual way rather than long documentation. And it's far quicker to get the product to market. So collaboration is absolutely key, I think. Getting more team involvement from the clients as well. I think all too often in agencies in particular, account management will deal with the clients, maybe project management, but not the team. I think it's really important to get the UX architects in speaking to the clients as well. And far more face-to-face time, no matter on the geographical location. I think a lot at the moment can happen on conference calls and things, but getting that face-to-face really adds a lot of value that's just lost in conference calls. And encouraging more cross-project creativity and not working in silo. And by that I mean if you're in a company and you're working in a team, you need to speak to the other UX architects and see what they're working on as well, and see what other projects are coming up, because often there's quite a lot of crossover and learning and creativity that can be had, and ideas that can be brought together and made bigger and better by working together and not in silo. And also just slowing down and following a good design thinking methodology, just not jumping straight to wireframes, doing a lot of creative thinking up front, because I think all too often, especially if you're working with account managers and project management who don't necessarily come from a background where they understand UX and how to work with it, it's really important that we're the ones that drive the fact that we need thinking time and research time up front. So, and one thing that agencies do, which I find less on client side, is because agencies always put 8 hours a day down as chargeable time, and that doesn't really leave enough time for collaboration and just thinking and allowing yourself to be bored and become creative. So client side, you usually put far fewer hours down, because that does allow for those meetings and collaborations and team get-togethers and brainstorming workshops where you can come up with those creative ideas. So, and just a quote from the great scientist Albert Einstein, creativity is contagious, so pass it on. Thank you. So does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Hi, just going back to your slide, your point on collaboration. Having worked in another agency myself, One of the biggest challenges I faced and experienced was trying to, again, work with the account managers and the account directors from the beginning of the project. So even when they pitched the agency's services to a client, and trying to get a level of understanding to the account managers at that level, as well as at the beginning of the project, to obviously help to define the strategy or whatever the project might be. Have you faced any challenges in your experience?
Yeah, I think all too often, especially in my last role with Spark, all too often account management can have a brief prepared and just delivered into the UX team. Whereas actually I think it's really important that UX gets involved before that, and UX strategy is included within that brief writing at the really early stages. So much earlier engagement, I think, can really help that. Otherwise you're almost kind of stifled by whatever is in the client's head, and clients don't necessarily think in the way that we would think. So yeah, I can understand that much closer engagement in the earlier stages.
Would you have any words of wisdom to help try and fight that?
I mean, I think it makes the process smoother. So by account managers helping us, we can help them as well, because ultimately they want to do a great job for the clients and get excellent feedback, and we can definitely help drive that. Because if it ends up going down a road and then it's not working because we've stuck to the brief rigidly, it's going to take a lot longer to get it right. Yeah, it will have an element of failure to it, but we can get closer to the solution faster if we have earlier involvement. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's all we got time for. Sorry, next speaker. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I went over, but